Today is April 13th, 1998, and this is the AP Oral History Project. Today, Marion High School junior Luke Mitchell will be talking with World War II veteran and Marion resident Mr. Bob Whitlock.
Hello, this is Luke Mitchell, and with me is Mr. Bob Whitlock. Today we'll be discussing the history of Marion, Indiana, along with Mr. Whitlock's experiences before, during, and after World War II. Mr. Whitlock, thank you for being here with me today. Before we get started, let me ask you a few questions, and then we will get started. Okay, first of all, state your whole name and where we are.
My whole name is Robert Lee Whitlock, and we're in the WWII radio station
Okay,
in Marion, Indiana.
right. Okay, what's the date today?
Today's date is April 13,
Okay.
1998.
Sounds good. Do I have a permission to tape you with an audio tape?
Certainly do.
Okay, and do I have your permission to submit this information to the IU Folklore Archives?
Well, yes, that's all right with me.
All right, and finally, do I have your permission to submit this information to the Marion, Indiana Public Library?
Certainly.
Okay, now that we have that out of the way, let's get started with the AP Oral History Project. Where were you born?
I was born north of Mir, which is just west of Sweetser, on Highway 13, about 5 miles. Is on a farm.
Okay, what was your birthday? What day were you?
My birthday was December 2nd in 1920.
Okay, and what did your parents do? Did they farm or?
Yes, my dad was a farmer. My mother was a school teacher.
Okay, did she teach in a one-room schoolhouse or?
Well, she taught in the little schoolhouse at Mir, and I think there were 3 rooms there.
Okay, did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had half-brothers, 2.
Okay,
My mother remarried when I was 15 years old.
okay. What were they? How old were they? Were they older than you or?
No, they were younger, considerably younger.
Okay, and who did you live with in 1939? That would have made you, I guess, 19 when World War II really got started.
Yes, I lived with my stepfather and my mother on a farm north of Sweetser.
Okay, were you working on the farm then, or?
Yes, at that time I'd planned to make farming my profession.
Right. Did you go to how many grades did you go to school for? Did you?
I just graduated high school at that time.
Okay. Did you plan to go to college at that point, or?
No, I really didn't. I thought I wouldn't need a college education to be a farmer.
Right. So what did you, when you were 19 back then in 1939, what did you do for activities, for fun on your spare time, or did you go to downtown Marion, or?
Yes, we came to Marion usually on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday night. Maybe on a rainy day we'd come into town. Other than that, most of our recreation at that time was softball. We had a lot of very exciting softball games. There was a lighted softball diamond in Sweetser, and we also came out to Matter Park and played softball. We attended a movie in Marion about every time we came to town.
Oh, really?
That was about the extent, other than family gatherings and a euchre game or something of that nature.
Right. So, what kinds of factories and industries were in Marion at that time? Do you remember any of the factories that were there? Or?
Oh yes, there was the Farnsworth Radio and the Delta Electric, who made lanterns, electric lanterns, and lights for bicycles. Also, of course, the VA hospital was there at that time, and it's still there. It's one
still
of the major employees in Marion, I think.
Right.
Fisher Body, as my recollection, was not in town at that time.
Oh, really?
I think that they came later.
So
Their I don't recall too many other. I'm sure there were other manufacturing plants, but I know Anaconda and Paranite Wire were both in town at that time.
Right. Okay. What was back then? What was downtown Marion like? Was it the place to be?
It was the place to be for young people
Right.
around the courthouse square, either there or Custer's Last Stand out at 5 Points. But actually, I think downtown Marion was more active in those days than it is today because
really?
there weren't any malls to go to and that type of thing.
Yeah. Okay. I know you belong to Westminster Presbyterian Church now. Did you belong to a church then, or?
Yes, belonged to the Jalapa Methodist Church. We only lived about 2 miles from there, and it was convenient. And my mother and stepdad belonged there, so I belonged there. We had a little orchestra group that played, and we also had a pretty nice choir there, although the congregation was small.
Okay. What did when the war first broke out back in 1939? How was the community of Marion and like initially affected? Was it a shock to the town, or?
Well, we had kind of paid attention, listening to the radio, to the goings on over in Europe, and knew that Hitler was kind of a crazy man and was wanting to take over everything. And of course, our people were mostly isolationists. I think we didn't want to get involved in the war. There were some people who felt like we should jump right in and end it, which might not have been a bad idea. I don't know, but there were several factions, and I don't know that there was one overall feeling about the war. It was not in our backyard, so to speak, at that time, and so I think most people really didn't worry about it too much. Although the industries did pick up, and we did sell a lot of military supplies to the Allied countries over in Europe. We also put up blockades as far as German shipments were concerned,
Right.
and kind of boycotted them. But really, the main flow of things around here in 1939 we were getting to be back on our feet pretty much from the big depression back there in the early 30s.
Yeah.
So
you probably didn't figure it was going to be as significant as it really was, did you?
right,
Right.
We didn't think that it would be that tough on us.
Okay. When did the Marion residents, for the most part, start to leave to go fight in World War II? Was it back in 1940 or?
There was a selective service draft early on, and then things kind of quieted down, and a lot of the people who had been drafted were discharged, and then again the draft picked up, and we started building up our military certainly long before Pearl Harbor. Actually, that's when, in December of 41, that's when we declared war.
Right.
And soon after that, we declared war on Germany and Italy too.
Yeah.
But the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor is really what stirred things up.
Oh
with us.
yeah. So at that point, did a lot of your friends go enlist, or did they, at the time when all that broke, did they rush to go enlist, or were they a little tentative as to going to fight in the war?
I think that it was probably about 50-50. A lot of the people didn't want to go, and a lot of people did want to go.
Right.
I know that patriotism did pick up a lot. Of course, there was a lot of work to be done here at home too. I know a lot of my farm friends had an option if they wanted to be deferred. They had to prove that they were really producing food and
Right.
things like that for the armed forces. But a lot of those people didn't go. I enlisted, but I really don't know why. I did feel a lot of patriotism, I
Right.
guess.
Yeah. Were the most people were they just drafted, or did they come and volunteer to go there?
I think, like I said, I think it was about half and half.
Right.
Of course, they knew they were going to be drafted, and a lot of people felt, well, if I volunteer, maybe I'll get to do something that I want to do, rather than be forced to do something
Exactly.
that is not so attractive to them.
Right. So how big of you said that bombing of Pearl Harbor was kind of the significant turning point, so to speak. Was that the how big a deal in Marion was the bombing?
Well, I'll tell you this: everybody was just right up close to the radios, listening to every news broadcast that they could. Of course, we didn't have television at that time, and the radio was our big news media. That
Right.
is, the only method besides the newspapers is a lot quicker to hear what was happening over the radio.
Right. Right. So did when and where did you go to enlist in the army? Was there a place in Marion or?
Well, no, I went to Kokomo and talked to a sergeant there about going in, and he kind of filled me in on the options that I would have. And so I didn't do the signing up until I went down to Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis, and I guess that's where you would say I enlisted, was down there.
Right.
And then I went several places for additional training. Of course, I was only in Fort Benjamin Harrison a few days.
Okay. What year did you say that was in
That was January of 42.
Okay.
I went in January 1st of 42, which is about 3 weeks after Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. Okay. What made you choose to enlist in the service? Was it just basically your patriotism, or?
Well, it was that, and it was also the desire to select my military specialty, so to speak. This sergeant that I talked to over in Kokomo had kind of clued me in on some of the routine that would be available to me, and so I think it was a little bit of both, patriotism and also a desire to get a snap job.
Right. Right. What did your parents think when you told them that you're gonna go enlist in the service? Were they for it, or did they have some mixed feelings?
Well, they had some mixed feelings, but my parents were very patriotic also, and I think that they didn't want me to hold back. They were sorry to see me go, but yet they were glad that I had the feeling that I had about wanting to go.
Right. What did you tell us what you thought the day that you left? Did you after training, the day that you left, what were your thoughts? Were you thinking, man, I may not come back here? I mean, what was going through your mind at that point?
Oh, I thought that was a possibility, but I looked forward to the whole thing. I was, of course, young,
Right.
and I had a good girlfriend I was sweet on. I kind of hated to leave her,
Yeah.
but really, I guess I looked forward to it, and I didn't have a lot of dread about going. I knew that probably there would be some travel in store for me, and I might get to see things that I otherwise wouldn't have a chance to see.
Right. So where did you go at first when you left Indiana? Where'd you head for then?
Basic training was down in Wichita Falls, Texas.
Right.
And there was, of course, the war was on at that time, and the government was in a hurry to build up the armed forces, so our training wasn't as long or as rigid as it would have been in normal times. But there was 6 weeks of very uncomfortable, strenuous drill and dusty. It was a brand new camp, and getting up early in the morning and having people yell at you and things like happen in basic training. But
Right.
they gave us tests there, and I had opportunity to stay there and be a aircraft maintenance mechanic, or to go to Scott Field in Belleville, Illinois, and be a radio operator. So I chose the radio operator option and went over there for additional training as a radio operator.
Right. So at that point did you already know what branch you were going to go into at that point, or was that just kind of general?
Yeah, I knew I was in the Air Corps.
Okay.
When I left Fort Benjamin Harrison.
Right.
And in fact, that the branch that I enlisted in was, and of course, the Air Corps was building up. They were glad to have a lot of people.
Right.
But I had no idea what I would do. I'd had some mechanical training on the farm with tractors and machinery and stuff like that, but I thought I would enjoy radio more, and probably would get to travel more with radio.
So what did you so that's what you wanted out of all the branches? You would have picked that as the Air Force, or was that the main thing that you wanted to go into, or would you rather been that than the Navy, for instance, wouldn't you?
Oh yes. Since I enlisted, I could have been Navy or Marines or anything. The Air Corps was pretty new, really, and I thought I'd like to be around it.
Okay, so you said they determined that through tests, and also did they give you any? They let you kind of pick what you wanted, too, right? And then they.
Yes, it was kind of an option, but they did give us aptitude tests. If I hadn't had the aptitude for radio operating, why I probably wouldn't have got there.
Right.
But we went to Belleville, and I did real well as a Morse code operator, and advanced pretty rapidly through the 22 weeks of radio operator training there. And after that training, we were sent out to practice in the ground-to-air stations and the point-to-point stations.
Right.
I went first to, where did I go first? To Boise, Idaho. There were a lot of B-17s there, stationed there at that airfield, and we practiced radio communications with those B-17s, and also with their destination ground radio stations. And then I went to McClellan Field in Sacramento for some further training, and only there a short time, and we shipped out then to the South Pacific.
To the South Pacific. So you traveled all around America before you got out of there, right? You went from training base to training base.
Right.
What island were you stationed on initially when you first got to the South Pacific?
We landed on New Caledonia, and from there we were there only a few days, and then we went up to the New Hebrides Islands. I was on an island called Espiritu Santos, and it was had a good harbor. There were a lot of Navy ships came in there for repair and so on and so forth, and we were just kind of south and east of Guadalcanal a little ways, and there was quite a lot of fighting up through the Solomons and the up through Bougainville and then over on Tarawa, and a lot of those. And there are a lot of aircraft movement there, bombers and so on and so forth. So we were pretty busy. I was there for a year and a half on Espiritu Santos.
Right. So what made them decide to send you to the South Pacific as opposed to somewhere out east, did they need the Morse code operators out there because of the
Yes, the aircraft movement wasn't it wasn't like a bombing run
right.
like they had from England over to Germany. It was
Mhm.
short distance and so on and so forth. This Pacific area is quite a large area, and that was just where they needed
Right.
the radio communications. There,
So-
we kept track of nearly all of the aircraft movement. We had cryptographers who coded and encoded messages that they put down before us, and we would send it wherever this airplane was going to go or whatever
Right.
the message contained. We actually didn't know what was in the messages often.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So is that what you did all your 3 years in the South Pacific? Just
Yes.
basically the same thing.
Basically the same thing. I became what's called a CHOP, a chief operator, and my biggest job then was not actually operating, but scheduling the operators on there. Of course, it was 24-hour around-the-clock work, and
Right.
we had 3 or 4 guys on a shift, and we had to schedule their meals and their work hours and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I worked as a chief operator for probably a year and a half of the time that I was over there.
Right. So you kind of worked your way up to a supervisor position there
Yeah,
after
kinda,
you've been in there for a while.
Yeah, I was a tech sergeant
Yeah.
actually, and after a while, we were sent up to several of us were sent up to Hickam Field in Honolulu, and we were training there to go in with a task force to Iwo Jima, and this was exciting, but it didn't happen as quickly as it was supposed to, and it took them 5 months to nullify the batteries, the armament that was on Iwo Jima. It was very difficult. The ships shelled it, and the bombers bombed it, and they still didn't secure the island for quite a while. So I was there on Hickam Field for 5 months, and then finally in February, the task force sailed out there, and we landed on Iwo Jima then after several days of fierce fighting before we could go in, because we weren't a fighting outfit.
Right. They wouldn't let you in
They
there.
wouldn't let us go in. We sat out offshore and watched the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Could you see it well from there? Or?
Oh, yeah, we could see our big guns shooting. We hit an ammunition dump and made a big exciting explosion for several minutes.
So you guys all cheering when you?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of cheering, and
Yeah.
of course, unfortunately, we also could see our landing boats trying to land on the shore, and the enemy Japanese were dug in pretty well, and they sank a lot of our boats and killed a lot of our people who were trying to land too.
Yeah.
And we had to sit out there and watch that.
Right. So what did you when you were in the South Pacific? What were your living conditions like? Did you live in barracks or tents or?
Well, down in when we landed in New Caledonia, we were given tents and cots knocked down. We had to put them up, and we were up on the side of a hill, and gave us mosquito netting, but we didn't know how to use it. We just draped it over the cots, and we all got pretty well chewed up with mosquitoes the first couple of nights. But when we went up to Espiritu Santos, we were billeted with a Navy outfit, and we ate their food, and we slept in their tents, and they had floors in their tents. And it wasn't like being out in the jungle somewhere. It was a tropical, a lot of rain.
Right.
But being with the Navy, they pretty well were taken care of as far as food, and we had Cokes and things like that.
Right.
So it really wasn't as rough as we see in like in the Vietnam
yeah.
and that type of war.
Right. So you had it all right there when you were there for 3 years.
Yeah, well, basically, I was a year and a half on Santos, and then up in Hickam Field, of course, we lived in Quonset huts,
Oh.
and they were, of course, an improvement over the tents. But
Right.
then when we went out to Ewo, here again we set up tents to start with. Our radio equipment was built in a mobile unit like one of our modern house trailers, I
Oh,
guess. And we had to dig it in. Ewo was very sandy, and we had a lot of trouble trying to dig a hole big enough to get our communications equipment in a safe place.
Yeah. So after you were in the South Pacific, you went to Hickam Field, which was in Hawaii, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then you went to.
Then I went to Iwo Jima.
Okay. And you went home.
Well, in July of '45, they were letting people go on a point system, and I had enough points that I got to have 30 days temporary duty rest and recuperation back home.
Right.
So I was sent back home, and while I was home, they dropped the atom bomb on Hiroshima,
Yeah.
and so the picture changed, and I was just ordered to stay at home until in October I went to San Antonio and was discharged from the
Oh, really?
army there in San Antonio.
So what was your
Yeah.
initial reaction when you first found out we had bombed Hiroshima?
Oh, I was glad.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd been there on Ewo, and I'd seen our B-29s coming in there with all shot up and
Yeah.
wounded on board, and I thought the best thing we could do was end it
Right.
as soon as we could. And
Yeah.
I hated to see all the loss of life that went along with the atom bomb, but still, I think it was this sane thing to do to end it.
Yeah. Did you were you located during your time in the South Pacific? Were you located near any battles, like New Guinea, for instance, or Guadalcanal? Were you
Well-
close to? How far away do you think you were from the fighting that was going on there? Were you?
Well, we weren't near any hand-to-hand fighting. We saw evidence of it,
Right.
with people returning back and forth, and we certainly on Espiritu Santos we had some Japanese bombers come over. They tried to hit the airfield with some bombs, but they were very insignificant. I mean, the fighters, the the Navy Wildcats, and we had some P-38s there that just went up and chased them or downed them,
Yeah.
one or the other. So that while I was there, I wasn't exposed to much of anything. The worst thing that happened while I was there to people in my outfit was we had movies at night, outdoor movies, and some guys were sitting on a bomb and it exploded.
Oh, really?
And it killed about 5 people there. And
Wow.
but that was our own doings. It wasn't
Yeah.
enemy action.
Yeah. Man.
But when we went up to Ewo, our outfit had the control towers, and we also had the radio ranges and the ground control approach systems, radio systems for the aircraft. And we set up as soon as we got in there, and the Japanese, this was down towards the south end of the island at Motoyama Airstrip number 1, and the Japanese were still up in the north end of the island, and they could shoot down at us. They picked out our masts for our radio range as targets, and they came pretty close to us every once in a while, but it was not like being in a hand-to-hand firefight or anything like that.
So you had some scary
Yeah.
kind of experiences once in a while, but it
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
too.
Yeah, we
When they
hit the
flew over
dirt.
the-
You
Right.
could usually hear them coming in, and
Yeah.
you'd hit the dirt. And we had shelters made, and we captured a lot of a lot of tunnels and pillboxes and things like that. They were really dug in on Iwo Jima there.
Oh, really?
And that's my first visual sighting of the use of flamethrowers that the Marines used to burn out the Japs out of, out of all these tunnels and things.
So did you when you during World War II, did you have a good picture of what Hitler was doing to the Jews over on the other side in Europe? Did you have a good understanding of that, as we have all the movies and stuff today of the Holocaust? But did you, at that time, did you really know what was going on over there?
I had no idea as extensive as it finally turned out to be. I knew that he was ruthless and would not stop at anything in order.
Okay, we're back with Mr. Bob Whitlock. A couple more questions for you. What was the very first thing that you did as soon as you learned that the war was over? The very first thing that as soon as you found out that news.
We were on Iwo Jima when VE Day occurred in May, and we all grabbed our carbines and started 4th of July celebration, firing off a lot of rounds into the air.
So, and you were back home then, right? In your
well, for VJ Day, I was back home. I didn't come home until late July.
Right. And the war was over in September then, or?
Yeah, the VJ Day was over. Well, actually in August.
Okay.
It was shortly after they dropped the atom bombs.
Right.
And,
how had Marion changed when you returned, in terms of, you said the women's role was increased as the men went to go fight in the war, and the women kind of took their jobs in the factories and stuff. Was it a lot different when you came home, or?
Oh, I don't think so. There's been a lot of new technology and advancements made, and manufacturing was picking up, and we had a lot of lend-lease deals with European countries, and we gave them a lot of money and a lot of equipment and supplies and things like that.
Right.
So I think the economy just kept going right on up.
Right. So when you got back, did you mentioned that you thought you were going to be a farmer, and so did you pick right up in farming, or did you?
Yes, I did. I stayed home for almost 2 years before I decided to go to Purdue. I had trouble with my back, which a farmer can't do much farming with a bad back, and I also got the severe case of poison ivy, seemed like every summer. So I decided to take advantage of the GI Bill and go to college.
So they'd pay for all your college in GI Bill, and you went to Purdue.
I went to Purdue, and I took air transportation engineering, which was a basic engineering course for the first 2 years, and then they kind of branched out into airport work and aircraft maintenance and things like that. But I still didn't go to work in the air transportation industry.
Right. You ended up working at RCA.
I ended up making TV picture tubes at RCA in Marion.
Oh, yeah?
They came down and interviewed, and they needed engineers and supervisory people, and so I signed up with them and worked there for 36 years.
Yeah. What did when you got back from the war, did you find out about any friends or relatives that had been killed over there when you got back, or?
Yes. Well, I heard about it before my cousin I lost. I found out about that before I came back, but he was lost in an aircraft over Germany that was shot down and killed. But there were several of friends and acquaintances that I knew about that lost their lives.
Right. So when you look back at the war in general, were you Are you glad that you were a part of it, that you signed up for the war in Kokomo on that day, or would you, if you had to do all over again, would you have done the same thing, or would you have done it differently?
No, I think I'm happy that I did what I did, and I don't regret it at all. I think it was a good experience, and it's a good feeling for me to know that I did what I could for
Right.
the United States.
Okay. And then a final question, how does the patriotism of back then compare with the patriotism that you see today? You think it was a lot stronger back when you were in the war, or?
Yes, I believe that there was more patriotism, more display of patriotism by just flag waving type things and
Right.
speeches, and politics weren't like they are today. I think if we were to get into another war, we'd see the same kind of patriotism that we saw then. But
Right.
I don't think a minor conflict like we have with
Saddam.
Iraq
Yeah.
is going to bring out the patriotism like a world war did.
Right, right. Well, Mr. Whitlock, thank you very much for joining me today, and it's been a pleasure. This is Luke Mitchell, signing off for the AP Oral History Project.